Hello, welcome, peace and love, everybody, to our next lecture. Today we're going to be talking about what's known as attribute fields. If you've been used to doing this before, um, with the old desktop version, we call that attribute tables. So even I'm a little bit getting used to this new terminology, but we're going to try to stick with the online um, way of speaking, which is fields, and also queries or filters, which is what is the same thing done on the online version. So let's begin with, let me get my slides rolling here. Okay. And, let's review a little bit. You've already experienced this a little bit, but let's review this idea of the power of GIS. And you have this combination of things that are drawn on a map, features, layers, right, that are drawn on a map. So you have that visual component of the of GIS, but there's also the information that's included in as well. So could be locational information or feature type information. And so essentially qualitative or quantitative type of information, right? So what we're saying here, for example, we mean information about the features, right? So when we store this information, we're going to keep this in some type of table, and we're going to link that table to the feature, and then there have each one of these features has its own like record of this in the table, stored to kind of provide that information when a user goes in and searches for these type of things. When you're clicking on ArcGIS Online and you click around on the different features and a little pop-up shows up, well, the pop-up is displaying the information that comes from the fields table, from this table we're talking about. And so attributes is another term we're going to use here. Attributes is just a GIS term for your information in the table. Okay, so your attributes, like I said, commonly referred to as attributes table. So like, let's look at this example. We have a polygon, this red polygon, and then these blue little lines here. It's some basic stuff like a watershed and some creeks, tributaries built in there. To provide additional attribute information, okay? Like for example, if we were to click on the red polygon at the top of the slide, there are 3 separate fields there. One for the name of the feature, which in this case, let's call it Jeff's Creek. Another field for the type, like what is it? Okay, in this example, this is very basic, it's a watershed. And then we can also have quantitative information. So the great thing about this being spatial data is at some point we said, okay, well, how big is this polygon? And that's a type of operation that could be run even after, because you have all that information because it's built into a map. So in this case, we're talking about a 50-kilometer squared type of thing, right? Same type of idea when we look at the bottom, and there's also a point down here also. I didn't see that. The black point could be something as well. But this is the idea. Looking at the rivers and the little point down there, some kind of observation. We also have another field in there called average flow, okay, versus average depth for the river. So each one of those being a unique field in a table. So when we think about a field, okay, your field is going to be the same as a column, right? So if we're looking at a traditional table like in Excel, you have columns that go vertically and then rows that go horizontally, okay? And so in this case, what we're saying is the fields make up the column. So at the top where the header is, that would be the field name, okay? And then for the rows, each one of those rows would be kind of designating the specific feature, okay? So columns are the fields, then your feature here. So then when they meet each other and where they end up meeting is the, in this case, what we're referring to as a record. So each cell is the same as a record, right? When you click on the pop-up and it shows you the various attribute information, well, you're going record by record. You're viewing record by record. What's available with the for the feature versus the field in that instance. That's what's going on there. Yeah. So this is the thing here. When we talk about vectors, there is I don't want to say capability, but there is truth to rasters having attribute or field tables as well. But let's focus on vectors for this lecture and lab. We know that your vectors, the features are going to be either points, lines, or polygons, right? And each feature has properties or attributes. I'm repeating myself now, right? But the attributes, or your records, okay, they're going to be stored in a related field attribute table. Each field is a column. That's what we just said, right? So now we're looking at this in a little bit more depth. We saw this example previously, but this is the idea, right? So we have this red, well, you can't tell it's red, but this fire hydrant here, okay, this is our feature. And to display that on the map, we plot it as a point feature, okay? So it's this point feature right here. And then the link between these two things in the field table would be over here. And each one of these fields, so we have 3 unique, I guess 4 unique fields in this case, because we have an ID number so that the GIS can say, okay, which arbitrary record is this? But forget this ID for a second. What really matters are these 3 here, because these were added somewhere else, okay? By a user somewhere, maybe manipulating metadata, description, or these type of things. But anyways, so yeah, you would have, like in this case, a field for flanges. How many flanges are there, right? And it's saying it's saying for this feature there are 3 flanges. Well, let's take a look. 1, 2, 3. Correct. Color is red. Let's just kind of go with that, okay? And then also another thing we can't really visually tell. Maybe somebody that's an expert in fire hydrants would know this stuff by looking at it. I don't know. But that's neither here nor there. The pressure rating of this particular hydrant is a high pressure rating. So again, these fields can be infinite. They really can. We'll try to simplify things in this course and not overload you with too many, but this is the idea. You have fields and how they are correlated to features in your features from your layers. So I guess this is the best way I could describe this. You have a one-to-one relationship. Okay, that means that they're linked together. One-to-one relationship between the geospatial feature and the record in the dataset's field table, right? So everything that occurs in this row for ID 1, boom, 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 boom. All 3 of these things, all 3 of these records / cells, as you might call them, but all 3 of these records refer to what's going on attribute-wise with this particular fire hydrant, which is this one right here, okay? Yeah, so another discussion here, let's take this a little bit further, and the beauty of this GIS and the power, right, as we described, is the ability to, we have this information stored, and you could go around and you could click the little pop-ups and gather things that way. But if we wanted to take this a little bit further and kind of do kind of global type of commands, instead of, kind of pinpointing each one of these things manually, what if we wanted to say, hey, where are all of the, show me all of the 3-flange fire hydrants, like point those out, call those out, or show me all of the yellow fire hydrants that have 2 flanges, right? So things like this. This is some very simple and basic analysis. We're moving into now the analysis side of things with GIS. And that's where we're going with this. Some common operations. We're going to call this, traditionally we would call this a query, right? Like you're asking a question, as I just did, or you're posing a, let me see this type of record. So it's, it's that type of thing. But another way that this might sound more familiar to you or make more sense to you. So what Esri has done now with the ARC Online stuff is they've kind of removed the query terminology and gone with something called a filter. And so that's kind of ubiquitous throughout any type of, especially tabular data. You want to filter these specific records, right? I want to filter my students in Geography 20, that I'm looking at my whole, roster of 8 different classes. So I go in Excel and I perform a filter, boom, and it shows me only those. And that's kind of the same thing that's going on here. Your query, your filter, it's the same thing, terminology-wise. But we're going to use filter because that's what ArcGIS Online uses or refers to the operation as, okay? And this is a very common thing in GIS. Basically, like I said, you're selecting a subset of records. Could be 1, 2, 20, 25, whatever the values, whatever the case may be, based on values that you specify. So it's like you're specifying attributes. You're setting, let's call it, you're setting criteria for the GIS to essentially go out and find these records that you're specifying, right? And so filters, simple or complex, there's really no end to this, involving one attribute or multiple depending on how many conditions you set, okay? So here's an example of a query with 3 criteria based on that fire hydrant stuff, right? Show me the location of all the fire hydrants, okay? So like on the map, boom, plot them out, like highlight those for me. Think of that's another way to think of relating this. It's like a highlighter, right? So show me on the map all the fire hydrants that have not been pressure tested, that are near high-rise buildings, and are more than 300 meters from another fire hydrant, okay? So 3 specific criteria. It's like we're really filtering down all of these different records to find something very, in this case, pretty specific. Now this is, if you've used GIS in the past, this might look familiar to you, and this certainly is to me, because this is the type of GIS I was working with for many, many years. And, I still go back to it, but this is kind of a legacy or older style of GIS at this point. And that's okay. But I wanted to just bring this to your attention so that if you're looking up querying in GIS, you'll probably see something like this and you go, that does not look like what we did in the lab. But yeah, in ArcMap, which is an old style of, which is a desktop-based, like a local processing or a local type of software on a computer, not a web-based like we use in ArcGIS Online. So essentially what you have with this query is what they call it selection. So that's the same type of thing, but brings up a window, and then you go through and you select your fields. And then you go in and you say, okay, equals this, or it's greater than this. You see the little, it's like kind of like a calculator. This is how you're setting your conditions, okay, and your various criteria. The thing is, though, it can get tough for new users to, because you have to set the language exactly right. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's almost like you're coding, but not all the way into the code itself. So you still have to provide the software the correct call out, and then it will do the rest of the work for you. When it works, it's really cool. You end up with kind of a two-pronged approach here to viewing what happens with the selection or the filter. So let's see, they wanted to, I guess this is some counties or something, whatever this example is. The county's name is Cache, and so they ended up finding one record, so one feature, okay? I shouldn't say one record, one feature, with all these records, but what ends up happening is the feature will highlight here in kind of a cyan color, and then also it's hard to see, but on the map as well, whatever that feature's properties end up, in this case a polygon, boom, it's highlighted for you. Now if there was multiple, you'd see kind of multiple cyan things throughout the map. That's the idea, okay? So talking about a few other things, we could set, and this is with, well, I guess with quantitative and qualitative, right? And I'll be honest, I haven't explored this a ton in ArcGIS Online. I know that the features, I know that the capabilities are out there. It's just a little bit different, but you're welcome to explore this kind of stuff. I want to explain this to you based on theory so that you understand these various types of conditions, what they will do to a map, and to the data, essentially. It's kind of why I'm showing you this stuff, not necessarily saying we're going to go use New York and we're going to find these different things. But like, for example, let's say, so what do we got going on here? We got a whole bunch of counties. We've also got, what, New York plus New England, so it's about 6 or 7 states here, all in one kind of thing, all in one GIS. And so if we say that we choose the field, and we say the field is the state, and the state equals Vermont, well, we're going to end up with the counties here. Okay, so we have all the features that are counties of Vermont, boom, right here. Okay, if we say the state is greater than or less than New York. So essentially what we're saying is it's not New York. That's a better way to say that. The state is not New York, okay? All the counties that are not New York, then in that case, will become selected, right? Will become highlighted for you. Again, these are all, don't get confused. I know there's a lot of different terminology you're throwing around, but don't get confused. This is just another way of filtering things, just a type of filter you want to use. So in this case, let's say the area is greater than or equal to 1,000 square miles. So state in this case doesn't really matter anymore, right? Things are, in terms of states, is somewhat arbitrary in this case, because now it's just looking for counties. And the counties that have this size criteria, boom, it found them. And it's kind of a random distribution, but that's okay. Just trying to show what this is like. Now, population density is less than 250 persons per square mile. Basically, what we're doing with this one is we are finding more rural, more rural type of counties. And yeah, you see that kind of thing happening here. So New York City and Long Island are here, which are the very densest types of populations. Same with Boston over here, right? Places along Connecticut and Rhode Island where there is a lot of commuter towns in the tri-state area between New York, Connecticut. We didn't include New Jersey in this one, but you get the idea. Basically, along this little corridor here, you have a lot more urbanization and denser population. Whereas as you get closer to the kind of middle and upstate New York and places like Maine, etc., you don't see a lot of dense population. It's just not, it's just not what happens. Regardless, the whole idea of this was to show some of these examples. Okay. I want you to fundamentally understand this part too. If I ask you about these types of conditions, I want you to understand right away, okay, this is going to do that to my data, right? So like if I use an and condition, and again, it's like we have more than one type of query going on, right? We can do that. We can have like we said, there was 3 earlier with the fire hydrant example. So if we have more than one, so let's say you've got one and something else, what that does is it typically decreases the number of records in your selected set, in your filtered set, okay? Because what you're saying is that 2 criteria must be met. So that's a way of, well, it's going to reduce the amount or decrease the amount of records that are filtered back. An or condition, on the other hand, actually traditionally will increase the amount of data that is, filtered. So let's see, 1 criteria in a set must be met, but you could have the others that don't even matter, but because you have the or, so you might have 1 out of 10, and if 1 out of 10 fits, then they all kind of show up, right? That's the idea. And then a not type of condition selects everything that doesn't meet the criteria. So we saw that in the example with the not New York, okay, kind of thing. And you can't really say one way or another if it's going to be more or less than the original. It just, that's kind of dependent on the data itself. And the idea is you can have, so-and-so and so-and-so or so-and-so, right? Like there can be a whole bunch of combination of this, really endless in that sense. At least in the ArcMap world where you're setting it up in that calculator. For online, we'll have to really kind of explore that. I encourage you guys to explore some of these as I show you how to use the filter function. I encourage you to explore more beyond just what I'm doing in the lab and asking of you, because that's how you really get in depth with this stuff.